Alrighty, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us on today's call. Welcome to the Loan Vision 200 series. I'm Jordan Pavelka, and today I'm joined by Brian Abbott of Optifunder. Brian's going to be talking to us about optimizing and automating your warehouse lines, but before we jump into things, I want to take just a moment to let everyone know that we are, in fact, recording today's call, and we're going to be sharing it to all registrants as well as posting it to our Loan Vision YouTube page. So it'll always be accessible for everyone. We want today's call to also be interactive. So if you have any questions, please feel free to send them to us via the Q&A box, and we'll have some time at the end of the demonstration to answer them. Brian, do you want to take some time right now to introduce yourself and introduce Optifunder to the group?
Sure. Yeah. So thanks, Jordan. And so first of all, appreciate the time. Excited to be here, and want to say thank you to you and Loan Vision for inviting us to participate today. And certainly congratulations. I think this is the 200 series, so the 200th customer, big milestone.
That is correct. Thank you.
Yeah, we hope to be there soon. So all great stuff. So again, thanks for having me. So. So I'm Brian Abbott, Chief Operating Officer of Optifunder. I'm a long-time mortgage guy. Spent probably the first half of my career in the mortgage business, running a couple companies here out of Atlanta, and then later on a larger scale. And in the second half of my career, actually in the mortgage bit, or jumped over to the technology side. And maybe the last 10 years or so building mortgage technology. So I still get to work with mortgage lenders, but not actually in the business this thing. So, and so we joined Optifunder about a year and a half ago, and it was just really something that called out to me. Optifunder is what we call the industry's first warehouse management platform. There are a couple pieces of technology out there dealing with warehouse lending, but almost every single one of them in the market today is built from the warehouse lender's standpoint. There are really no pieces of technology or management platforms to help lenders manage their warehouse lines. And so that's what we set out to do. We're an optimization platform. That's a buzzword, but there's some true science behind that. So we'll get into it a little bit later. And so we actually automate all of the pieces in that entire funding lifecycle and help lenders manage their warehouse relationships. So that's Optifunder.
Well, so Brian, the past year has really created some incredible conditions for the industry. What do you see in the market that makes optimizing warehouse lines right now so important?
Sure. Great question. We all know that we're in strange times or unique times. Actually, let me move to the next slide. So we are certainly, with the pandemic, with the volume, last year volume was up over 100% for just almost about everyone. So we are in unique times for sure. But one of the things that really kind of makes warehouse optimization so important or so applicable to so much of the industry today is the share of independent mortgage banking in terms of the share of the total production across the entire industry. It's been slowly creeping up over the last several years, and the last statistic I saw is that independent mortgage bankers who fund their loans, obviously with warehouse lines of credit, their share of the origination market is now somewhere around 70%, maybe even a little bit higher, depending on some of the studies you see. So, the first piece of it is just that, market conditions, it's an incredibly relevant topic for the majority of the industry right now. And it's the second piece, though, when you look at the market, right? What's happening in the economy today. Last year was an incredible run for mortgage bankers. It's still there. Right. We're still seeing our clients with record volume, but we know at some point it will slow, right? We can't sustain this. Right. We don't know exactly when. And so, we think that maybe we're starting to see some of that now, maybe the very beginnings of that. Rates are creeping up just a little bit. And one of the things that's interesting about this last big boom is that a lot of times when you see, increased big spikes in volume, that production costs per loan go down. In this case, or last year, production revenue was up, but also expenses are up. The cost to manufacture a loan went up somewhere around $500 per loan at the last study that came out from the MBA. And so if all of those are up and we start to see at some point, we think later this year, volume to go down, will start declining just a little bit, refis will slow down. Hopefully the purchase market stays strong. But as if you have an increasing cost environment and a decreasing volume environment, you can see what happens there in the middle. Those margins start to compress. And so it is incredibly important, best would have been last year, but certainly for now, incredibly important for lenders to start looking at opportunities to maximize their efficiencies, to reduce their costs wherever they can. So that's what we're seeing in the markets today.
So why would you recommend lenders focusing on, kind of warehouse technology and optimization?
Sure. So great question. And it's really three things that we see out there. So number one, there's really been historically a lack of tool sets for the back office, and particularly in the closing and the funding piece. And this is an interesting slide that it's not mine, but I want to spend some time on it and talk about it. But so really three things. Number one, there's just not a whole lot of tools out there. Now there is, and we've focused in that. We've decided that's a place that Optifunder wants to spend some time working on. And the other piece of that is, if you look at warehouse lending, it is perhaps the most, right, it can arguably be said one of the most important relationships an independent mortgage banker has. We all know that warehouse lending is the lifeblood of our industry. And yet in that whole process, the 20, 30 days or so where a loan is in warehouse, all of the pieces of that process are incredibly disconnected, right? You have a loan origination systems, your loan pipeline comes from there. If you're funding with 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 different warehouse lenders, particularly if there's any, funding teams on the call today, you're certainly aware that to fund a loan, you have to go out to 5 or 6 different warehouse lenders, log into their web portals, submit your requests, come back later to check on statuses. The doc custodians are disconnected. The tail end of the process when the loan gets sold to the investors, that's disconnected. So a lot of pieces are disconnected, and that's something that we set out to solve. And the last third piece really is that warehouse lending is complex, and the ability to optimize your expenses is not easy. And so that's where we believe that adding some tools and technology to help you manage those warehouse lines are important. I want to spend. This is an interesting slide, so I pulled it up, and I want to give credit where credit is due. This is not mine. As I was preparing for this presentation, I found this actually online, and this is actually a piece of information or a piece of a study that came from a Stratmore group, which is they put out actually a technology study across the origination markets every year. And so this was a little tidbit I saw, and so giving them due course for their work here. But what was interesting about this is a slide or piece of their study that they do on lender adoption on technology. And really the takeaway here is that the digital mortgage that we've all been chasing for numbers of years, we all know the Rocket mortgage, we've been chasing that for 4.5, 5 years now.
Yeah.
But the investment that lenders are making in technology is still majority of that focused on borrower engagement, the front end of the process. And so here they've actually taken this and actually bucketed it into technology categories. And you can see there at the tail end of the process, closing, and I would say, funding is a subset of that. There's been very, very little technology adoption across the industry on the closing. Way down on the back end of the process, we all say that things roll downhill in the mortgage business to closing. Well, actually, they go beyond closing; they go to funding. I would say actually majority of that 30% adoption on closing is probably with the recent adoption and an increase in e-notes. So there's very, very little technology that has been traditionally available to lenders. We're starting to see the emergence of that. Optifunder actually has built some of that. So that's the first piece, right? There's a lot of opportunity in the market today. There's a lot of opportunity for lenders to add some tools, right? If this is your most important relationship with your warehouse lenders, you have tools for your borrowers, right? With CRM, you have tools for the loan origination pipeline with your LOS, but you really don't have any tools out there. You haven't until now to deal with your warehouse lenders, and so that's part of it. So the other piece, I touched on this before, and so I won't spend too much time on here, but again, the current state of warehouse lending is incredibly disconnected. And technology doesn't, and workflow doesn't work when it's in a silo. So the fact that all these pieces are disconnected, there's a tremendous opportunity for picking up new efficiencies and streamlining and adding efficiencies to our business. We see that for most of this, to fund a loan, if you're doing it one at a time without technology and without tool sets, most funders are maxed out about maybe 3 or 4 loans an hour, and that's probably on a good day. And so, tying these pieces together, having your warehouse lenders and your origination, your LOS connect with each other, being able to fund all of your loans through a central funding queue is absolutely key to that. So that's the other piece. And then the very last piece, which is really kind of the topic of the webinar today, is that warehouse lending, and certainly best execution and coming up with the lowest potential cost on all of that, it's incredibly complex. It is easy to say that and misconceptions really that a warehouse line, a warehouse agreement may consist of a credit limit and an interest rate, right? We have a 20 or 30 or $50 million warehouse line at X interest rate. But if you've ever actually paged through a warehouse agreement, they're incredibly complex, and some of them are 20 and 30 pages long. And part of that is what we call the web of warehouse lending. So there are different terms, obviously. Each line is different, but depending on your capacity, each one has different sublimits. Each has different product eligibility, advance rates based on the different products, and certainly different curtailment schedules. And then on the fee side, certainly the expenses are all different. It could be tied to a different index, whether it's LIBOR or Prime, different funding fees, facility fees, and then certainly your non-use fees and rebates and so on and so forth. So, and like, this is not a knock on warehouse lending or warehouse lenders in any way, shape, or form, but the point is, in terms of optimization, that you have your loan pipeline kind of online. It's in the LOS. But your terms and your warehouse agreements are probably still in paper form, probably sitting in a filing cabinet somewhere. And so there is a great opportunity to leverage technology now to take your warehouse terms and marry them to the pipeline in an aggregate way across the loan pipeline. So anyway.
So when you mentioned that it's important to optimize those warehouse lines, I mean, all this complexity, is that what that optimization is trying to solve? Kind of simplifying it almost.
It is. In fact, we'll switch to the next slide here. So optimization is actually, there's a lot more to it. It's a buzzword in our industry today. Matter of fact, the last time I was at an MBA conference, which is for most of us a long time ago, about a year and a half ago, since we've all been grounded from travel recently. But I took a lap through the exhibit hall at the MBA conference, and I think I would guess to say that as I was walking up and down the exhibit floor, no less than about a dozen or so technology vendors had somewhere in their signage or in their literature that they were optimizing, that optimization, right? And so it's become a little bit.
I think we might be guilty as well.
Right. It's become a little bit of an overused used buzzword, but truly optimization is actually a science, right? They teach it in universities. And so when we apply it to things like warehouse funding, which is, again, going back to the finance side of our business, if you look at your P&L, for those who are responsible for the profit and loss statement, there's a very good chance that warehouse expense is second, third largest line item on your P&L. And so, it's certainly important to spend some time trying to optimize where you're funding your loans and how you're coming out across at the end of the month with the lowest potential cost and expense for the organization. And so we've actually, Optifunder has actually teamed up with a number of PhDs. It took us little over 2 years to figure out our best X model, if you will. So it's not easy. And so, particularly today, we see a lot of our clients when they come to us, they've been managing their warehouse lines, all the complexity off of, whether it's a legal pad or a spreadsheet. And there is, now there's actually a better way to do it. And in fact, I'll give you a little example here. What we did is what we found is we did a study on a number of lenders, different combinations of pipelines versus where they could actually fund their loans and how they could allocate it across their warehouse lines. And when you apply, again, the true science of optimization, which the definition of that is, coming up with a mathematically maximum or best outcome across with multiple constraints across a large set of variables. And so there's the best and there's the worst. And so what we found is that between all the different places and combinations of how you could fund a pipeline across multiple warehouse lines, there's about a 6 basis points, a little over a 6 basis point spread between the absolute worst combination of allocations and the best combination of allocations. And certainly no one wakes up every morning and makes the absolute worst decision every day. But none of us are able, because of the complexity, none of us are actually able to make the absolute most optimal, optimized decision on every single loan. And so that's where running an optimization engine through your pipeline certainly comes into play. And so even if, look, I think the last study I saw or the last report I saw is that last year, the average mortgage company produced a little over $4 billion in loan production for the year. And that's across the entire industry. So it may not be as high for independents, but it's up there, right? And even in normal times, if it's half of that, take that spread there of the 6 basis points across, the annual production. The variance between best and worst is a massive amount of money.
That's a big chunk. Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's absolutely worth the investment in working and finding a way to optimize your pipeline, really.
So, I mean, you're a lender, you've optimized your warehouse lines now. You're averaging you best execution at this point. So what's the next step in that, journey, if you will?
Yeah, so that's great. So great question. Glad you asked. I guess we've optimized our pipeline, but then the question is, what do you do with it, right? In this case, if you do run your pipeline through an optimization engine or spend some time trying to figure out how to do that, you end up with a nice savings. But then it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. We talked earlier about the disconnectedness of our industry. And so you take those savings and then all of a sudden throw them into an incredibly manual process. So the other piece, or the other half to optimization, or after optimization, I should say, is automation. And there are, one of the things that we encourage lenders to look at is, why go out and maintain 5 different logins to 5 different places and then come back and check for status, and their accounting teams come back at the end of the night to look for trial balance reports and reconciliation and so on and so forth. So we've moved really to a full lights out automated funding that allows the lender and the funding teams to work out of a consolidated master queue, stay in one place throughout the entire day. And with a very simple click of a button, send multiple funding requests, bulk funding requests out to all of their warehouse lenders in a single action, without leaving the system, without going to log into all these disparate systems. Making that request. When the warehouse lines on their side process the loan, send the wires out, those confirmations should come back to you. You shouldn't have to go check emails. You shouldn't have to go out and actually track down confirmations and so on and so forth. We believe that the loan origination system, the LOS, is still the system of record. There's a lot of debate about that, but we do believe that the LOS is a system of record. So you should have some mechanism to take those confirmations and sync them back to the LOS for archiving or for the rest of the team to find the information that they need as well. And so that's a big piece of it. The automation is just as important, if not more important, than some of the optimization. Throwing out a lot of buzzwords here. So, and then the last piece of this, we go through the whole cycle, right? Warehouse is you incur expenses over time, right? Warehouse lending, you have, average outstanding balances are important. You incur fees or rebates or, incentives based on all of that. That happens over time. And so the warehouse management, the warehouse optimization is more than just, the initial request. It's the entire, the optimization, I would say, is really the entire process for those 20 or 30 days while the loan is in warehouse. So from the initial, request to the time the wire is sent. And at the very tail end of that, when the loan is sold, there is a settlement statement, there's a purchase advice that comes back from the investor or the agency, whoever's picking up the loan. And then you take those fees, obviously, sync them back to your accounting systems, and then out to the warehouse lenders, so that you can actually free up your capacity and free it and flip the line and do it again. So the tail end of that process, in terms of automation, purchase advice processing, we hear from lenders every single day that they're sending, they're spending, they have multiple talented and educated staff folks that are doing nothing more than kind of looking for statements, typing in information. There's no reason for, highly qualified folks to be doing that when that process can be automated. So, again, I think a full optimized warehouse management platform does have the tail end of that, which is certainly needs to focus on making sure that savings don't go out the back door. And so we encourage everyone to look at an automated purchase advice solution as well.
So how do the folks who have optimized and automated, how do they know that this system they've put in place is working?
Sure. Well, there's a lot of information out there. Again, because of the disconnectedness of all the pieces in this business, without a platform in place, it is actually very difficult to find out how you're doing, how you're performing. So we encourage, again, everyone should have some kind of business analytics in their workflow, in their business. And a lot of this goes into the capital markets teams, the CFO, the treasury, and so on. But those who are, responsible for cash management, everyone knows that, the true, experience is a lot more than just, the interest on a loan, right? So you have the cash you've put into it, and there needs to be, in almost in any solution, an easy way to look at how your warehouse facilities are stacked up against each other. You have, an inventory of loans held for sale. You have a cash into the deal. You absolutely need a very easy, and you can see that on the right-hand side of the screen, a very easy way to calculate your return on equity with the warehouse lines, right? And so, there are tools out there. Optifunder has built part of that in terms of being able to pull that information back in and give the finance teams the ability to look at how they're actually doing.
And what kind of results have you seen folks get when they go through the optimization and the automation process?
Sure. Well, so, obviously it varies between lenders, depending on so many different characteristics, the type of business you're in, the size of your volume, and so on and so forth. Typically what we see across most folks and here's actually an example of one of the studies that we did. So we'll step through this in a second, but typically we see that folks can just on the optimization piece, they'll end up with maybe about a 10% or so reduction in their fees. But the automation piece is a lot more difficult to manage, to measure, but it's actually just as impactful.
Yeah.
And here's a study that we did for one of our clients. Pre-optimization, you can see the volume there. They're a pretty sizable lender. They're doing about $300 million a month. But pre-optimization, they were incredibly manual. You can see their interest expense there was a little over $1 million a month in interest and fees and so on. And they were running their funding department with 7 full-time funding team. Some of them were wire coordinators, I believe, but 7 folks actually trying to process loans. And as they went through the optimization, exercises, certainly the monthly interest expense reduced. You can see down there in the before and the after there. That's what is that, about 70? That's about $90,000 a month in interest. That wouldn't apply to everybody, but it's applicable to whatever volume you're doing. And the big piece there, I think one of the big interesting takeaways here is that in the funding team, they were able to reallocate and get some of their funders off to more interesting and more important things. And now they're doing actually more business with just 2 full-time staff people focused on funding versus the 7. So they're actually processing more loans, getting more loans out the door with fewer people. So
yeah, I mean, and that's awesome, especially when you consider. I mean, I know from Loan Vision's point of view, we have a lot of customers who have been able to reduce their accounting teams regardless of their growth because of the automation piece, and it helps a lot when it comes down to that human capital expense.
Right, for sure. Yeah, I mean, last year was just an absolute anomaly in our industry, and there will be, we don't know exactly when, we do see some reduction in the future. It's a mathematical certainty at some point. But we had an incredible hiring run here. So there's a lot of folks, a lot of great folks that are out there today, and we believe that a lot of them can be repurposed to more important tasks. And so those that can be automated, everything that should be automated should be. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is great. I mean, obviously, just the numbers for your client there, that's awesome. And it does look like we have a few questions. Would now be a good time to take those questions, Gloria?
Sure. Yeah. Let's see what we can do.
So real quick, the first question we have is, where exactly in the process does Optifunder kind of come in?
Good question. So how do we say that? I guess what I would say is, this is fairly new, and I doubt very seriously that many people wake up in the morning and say, jump out of bed and say, I've got to go find a warehouse optimization system.
Oh man, really? I do every day. Jeez.
What I do know, we talk to folks every single day, all day long, and what we do know is that there are quite a few folks out there who are looking for ways to streamline, ways to add, efficiencies, ways to you bring that digital mortgage that is so focused on the front end and bring that back to their team, bring that back. So what I would say is where Optifunder steps in is that anyone really who is looking to, add increased, efficiencies, streamline the workflow, and then certainly on the finance side, certainly on the P&L side, there is definitely room for improvement there. So that's where Optifunder kind of steps in.
Awesome. And I forgot to mention this before. I apologize for our attendees. If you guys haven't submitted questions already, you absolutely can in the Q&A box. But moving on to our next question. Joseph asks, does this work with all of the warehouses out there? And what happens when documents are needed in that process?
Right. So great question. And so it does work in the sense that it will automate to anyone who will accept the automation. There are certain different levels of functionality out there in the industry. So, Optifunder supports, I think at last count, there were 42 different funding templates that are available inside of the system. Some of those are full lights out automation. Some of those actually are a little bit more manual, but the ability is there. I think on the warehouse side, their technology will certainly catch up. There's a lot of investment that we see going in there. So the ultimate goal hopefully in the very near future is full automation to all the warehouses. And then on the back side of that, right, there's the loan origination system. So we're seeing great adoption from the LOSs. We actually, I think, are integrated to 5 different loan origination systems. And so really our goal is to just automate and facilitate those transactions in this marketplace, if you will. So.
That's awesome. And is Optifunder capable of accounting for non-usage fees or pricing incentives as well?
Absolutely. We call those, just constraints. So essentially anything that we need to track, anything that is in there can be configurable. So if it's a term, if it's a branch overlay or so on and so forth. So anything that's actually negotiated in the terms that you have to track is certainly part of the rules engine, if you will. And then beyond the hard pieces that you have to manage, there's the ability to put in overlays. So if branch A and branch B are different, or this one, warehouse A, you think requires too many, a few extra documents. So or you want to make sure that good example, right? This is still a relationship driven business, and so if your favorite warehouse representative is going to take you to the Super Bowl, right? You want to make sure you maintain an average outstanding balance, whatever. Those are all, configurable rules as well. And certainly, to answer the question, certainly, non-use fees, rebates, incentives, and so on and so forth. The engine looks for, the ways to maximize all of that.
Now, for me personally, I see the amount of resources that it takes for a new accounting system to go up. I know we have a whole deployment team and all that. So what kind of resources does it take to deploy a system like Optifunder?
Right. So great question. It's actually a very, very light process. Start to finish, 6 to 8 weeks or so to get up and running. So much of this is turnkey. It's click install. And we can configure a system from zero within a couple of days. And then really what happens in terms of the implementation process, there's initial discovery, right? How does a lender, who are they using? How many people they have in their funding department? What is their workflow? But then there's a little bit of a lights out, kind of a quiet period where we take all of this information. We actually, we talked about the data science behind it, the optimism. So we'll actually take 2 years worth of data and 2 years worth of history and run machine learning models and build all that for the clients, so that when we come back out of this 2 or 3 weeks later, we're actually able to start running tests, and then it becomes a training exercise for folks. So it's very light, non-technical. You really need a representative from accounting, somebody from funding, and then maybe an administrator from the LOS. That's about it.
Wow, I mean, that's a lot of work on your part. It sounds like heavy lifting from Optifunders. But that's nice that they only have a few weeks there. So
what the team does really, I think another point to make is that, particularly last year, as things were changing so fast, people were running out of capacity, calling your warehouse partners and saying, hey, I need a temporary increase in my capacity or my limit, and so on. All of that should not be on the lender's shoulders to manage. So, we particularly have a support team, You call in, you say, I've got a $10 million increase for the next 30 days. Our team does the configuration, and then, and we'll take care of that. So.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, and that's all the questions it looks like we have today. Brian, was there anything else you wanted to say before we wrap up? I mean, if anybody has any questions that you think of later that you have for Brian, you're more than welcome to reach out to myself or to Brian. I can forward those questions along. But Brian, where can folks contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. Forgot to. So I guess we'll send this out or post the deck and the recording. But anybody at Optifunder can help you. I'm happy to have a conversation. We welcome all conversations, and excited to talk to people and learn about their business and share a little bit about the Optifunder story and really why this is so important in terms of helping our industry, get to the full digital mortgage, if you will. So. But I just want to say thanks for having me. I enjoyed being here, and again, congrats on 200 customers. Big stuff.
Thank you. I really appreciate I really appreciate that. I want to thank everyone for joining our call today, and Brian, thank you. You've shared so much information with us today, and you're honestly a wealth of knowledge. It's amazing what Optifunder is doing for lenders out there today. You guys can expect the recording of today's call within a day or so via email. We're also going to post it on our YouTube channel, as I mentioned before. If you guys want to join us next week on Wednesday, we're going to chat with a team at CWDL about proper mortgage accounting processes. But until then, thank you again, and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thanks, Jordan. Thanks, everybody.